Good evening and welcome to Creed Speaks. This evening we have a wonderful segment where we're going to talk about new teachers, stories of becoming in a virtual reality. So my guests this evening are Sage Kohnstamm, who is a second grade teacher at J.O. Wilson Elementary School in Washington, D.C., and Pam Allyn, who, my goodness, is the founder of Lit World. She is a former teacher, but once a teacher, always a teacher. She is a professional developer. She's a renowned author who Pam has done so many things. And so I'm really excited to have both of you here. And I would just like to ask you to introduce yourselves and share something about your students, your work, the teachers that you're working with, that you're really proud of this year.
I can start, and I think we also have Zhané.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was using the wrong link. I was so confused. But yeah, my name is Janae Thompson. I'm a third grade ELA and social studies teacher at Muños Marin Elementary in Newark, New Jersey. And I'm sorry for joining late.
And I am so sorry that I didn't introduce you, Zhané. I actually didn't realize that you would join, but we are super excited to have you here. And I can't wait to hear about all the things that you're doing in Newark and what's happening at Muños Marin.
Thank you, sorry.
Okay.
I can start. So I'm Sage Kohnstamm, working in Washington, D.C. as a second grade teacher. I went to American University for my undergrad and went to Johns Hopkins for my master's in education. Something that I'm really proud of my students this year is their resiliency. They show up every day with not always an excited face in the beginning of the morning, but by the end of the day, they are proud of the work that they've done. They are excited about what they're learning. And I think in a time when it's hard for many adults to continue pushing on and doing what they need to do, to see little people do it so well and with so much gusto. I'm really proud of the hard work that they're putting in.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Pam Allyn, and I'm not a new teacher, but I'm very supportive and an advocate for new teachers. You guys are amazing, and we really appreciate you. And I'm an author of many books, one of which is called Every Child a Super Reader, co-authored with Dr. Ernest Morel. And we're about to start writing a new book together on the teaching of writing. And well, I'll just say my first official year of teaching was in Brooklyn, New York at St. Francis de Sales School for the Deaf. And I pay tribute and honor to my students and my fellow teachers who taught me so much in those early years. So thank you.
Hi, again, my name is Janae. I am a first year teacher. I just graduated from Montclair State University, where I was in a program called Newark Teacher Project. And so I decided to teach in Newark. And I guess I completely agree with Sage. One of the best things is that my students, they do show up every day, and it seems simple, but I mean, that's where the learning takes place. And I just keep thinking, if I were 8 years old right now, would I show up to my own sessions? And the answer is, I don't know, but they definitely do. They come and they want to be better, so that makes me want to be better. So yeah.
Thank you. You know what? You guys are talking about your students and their resiliency and their showing up. And you remind me of a memory of my first year teaching. It was actually the very first day of school. And I remember going outside onto the small yard where the first grade and kindergarten were playing. And I had my little class 1156 in my hand so that everybody would know who their teacher was. And I remember seeing these two little girls who reminded me of my best friend and I at that age, going upstairs, introducing myself. I'm Miss Wells, I'm your teacher. We're gonna have a great year. There's gonna be so much learning, and just like all this really hype excitement about school and just everything that you as a new teacher feel. And then I said to these 18, I had 18 students, which is like a dream class size, right? But I said to them, take out a pencil and a piece of paper, and I want you to write your name and one thing that you did this summer. And it had to be at least like 12 out of 18 of them started to cry. And I was looking like, oh my God, what just happened? What did I do? And what do I do to fix this? And I walked over to this one little boy and I put my hand on his shoulder and I bent down and I said, what's the matter? Why are you crying? And he looked up at me with these big doe eyes and his long eyelashes that were wet with tears. And he says, I don't know how to write my name. And I said, oh, that's okay, baby. You're going to learn how to do that and so much more this year. And it just, we had to figure out how to regroup. But that moment let me know that it was going to be a year of growing and growth for me, as well as for the children, and that we were going to learn from each other. So I just wanted to share that with you all, because you talking about your students' resiliency, they had to be super resilient to get through that moment and the year. So that said, I'm curious, we're all teachers. What inspired you to become a teacher? And in what ways is being a teacher what you thought it was going to be like or what you expected? And what surprises have you had?
So I can start. My mom was a teacher. My cousin's a professor. So I do have a lot of family that are in education, but I will be the first to say I never thought that I would be a teacher until I got to college and started to take some electives and things. And I realized, wow, like I'm really interested in this. And I love the fact that as a teacher, you're always a student. And I think for so long, my identity was rooted in being a student. So the fact that I'm a teacher, I can still learn every single day about something. So that's one of the reasons. And then another reason why I grew to like teaching is because of the sense of community that you have as a teacher, which brings me kind of into the next question that you asked, like how is teaching different from what you expected? And I think the answer is that in this setting, it can be very lonely. So I'm here, I'm in my living room. And I guess, I'm thinking, okay, even last year I was a student teacher and that opportunity was like cut short for me, but I got to experience what it was like to be in a school. Can I sit in and watch your lesson? Can I, what do you do? Like just quickly asking the teacher next door, what do you do in this situation? And I felt like in the beginning of the school year, I really didn't have that. But I think it's just in terms of, I think you just have to put yourself out there and definitely reach out. And the more you reach out to different peers, the more you'll have contacts and you'll be able to, talk to your team teacher and things like that. But that's definitely how I feel right now. Like it's a bit lonely, and I never would have expected that, because when you go to school, the school building is just like full of students, full of life, full of energy. And it's not like that.
I totally agree. I feel lucky. This is my third year teaching. And I was really lucky to work with a strong team that was really supportive. And I went into teaching because I had a lot of relationships with teachers that changed my understanding of what I was capable of, and who I wanted to be. And so that's what I try to provide for my students still, is that space of community, and that space for relationship building. But like Zhané was saying, I think it's a really lonely time to be a teacher. And there's so many parts that school doesn't teach you when you're in teacher training. They teach you the basics of what ideal teaching looks like, but not only do I teach in a school where often we don't have all of the basics that we need, but when we're virtual, there are so many other pieces that are being added on that you really have to go with what your gut says is the best decision for your class, and also what you know to be right. And so it can feel extremely lonely and confusing. And I think that's something that is talked about, I think, in some ways on the higher level of how isolating this pandemic is. But when you're doing a job that really is based in community, to do that in an isolated silo is really difficult.
I think what you're both saying is so important and really profound, because even, I mean, thinking about teaching, Sharon had asked, why did we go into teaching, or why did this begin? And I think for me too, just, I mean, so many years ago, but my pull to the classroom was for that sense of community, and that idea of being surrounded by the humanity and being together and being on a learning journey, and that you're both talking about, which is not just about the children's learning journey, but about ours together, and that looking at that teacher across the hall and seeing what is she doing, and just having those interactive moments together, or just the nearness of the children themselves. That's just such a joy. So I feel that so much for you right now. And I think that the work, I would say one thing I just want to advocate for is, if you can take a minute to jot down reflective thoughts each day, because I think this is going to be something you look back on, I hope when we have safer, healthier times, and say, I can't believe I did that, and so just to honor yourselves and to really trust that that sense of loneliness is because you're both amazing teachers, and you're feeling that's absolutely normal. And because that's what we long for in our teaching. Both my grandmothers were teachers, and something that I learned from them was just how much love you get from the children themselves, and how that stayed with them even into their old age. And they talked a lot about their students even many years later. And so I think we can find a lot of ways to connect across the internet now, and all these Microsoft and Zoom and all the different ways we're doing this, but there's just nothing like being together.
So you're all talking about connection. At least that's the theme that I hear: connection and relationships. And so if you could tell us a little bit about why relationships matter and how you build them. How do you build them in your classroom? How do you build them in your work with teachers and the work that you do, Pam, in schools? Yeah, could you talk a little bit about that? You're all muted.
I didn't know. Sage, are you going to start, or?
Yeah, I can go ahead. I didn't know if Pam was in the middle of saying anything.
No, go ahead.
For in terms of academics, relationships above everything, because if we don't have relationships down, no learning will occur, and then the day is really a wash. So if I have a strong relationship with my students, especially my students who are struggling academically, if I have a relationship with them, they will work so much harder and meet their potential at a different level than if they are not invested in the relationship. For example, I have one student who came in reading at a kindergarten level. And he was someone on the first day who interrupted almost everyone who said something. He just had a lot to say, but academically he wasn't quite there yet. And so I built a strong relationship with him through conversations at lunch, which we do still have lunch in virtual learning, and conversations after school, and getting him to read with me after school. And today we did our December progress monitoring, and he is reading just slightly below grade level. So by building strong relationships, I was able to not only get him excited about the learning, but really invest in putting in the time necessary. So I think sometimes relationships can be looked at as kind of like the fluffy, are you like close with your students sort of idea. And really, if they are willing to put in that time and be close with you and trust you, they will succeed academically.
Okay, so I completely agree. I make it a point every day, just like in a practical way, like to send out a poll every day. Just, I call it a mood meter. You tell me how you're feeling, just something really quick. I used to have students share out, but we're moving through the school year, and I think they're more comfortable with reaching out to me in the chat if there's something that they need to share or whatever it is. But I think it's definitely important to know your students' interests and like even their like self-deemed weaknesses, or I'm no good at, I don't know, reading or whatever the case may be. It's really important because you want to incorporate the things that they care about in your lessons at any, wherever they fit into your lessons, you want to incorporate them. I'm sorry. So I'm fortunate that my district is using like a new curriculum that merges like language arts and social studies together. And so even though the students may not be able to make direct connections with the text or whatever it is that we're learning about, they're able to kind of just relate to the information on a personal level. And I felt that it really helped with having classroom conversation and help them want to read more or want to know more. Even today, they're like, Ms. Thompson, why are you stopping right now? And I'm like, we don't have time to continue to go on. So I definitely think, including their interests and what they like into a lesson definitely just makes the day go by a bit smoother. And yeah, I can end there.
I actually think, I'll say, I think both of you are, don't ever even have a doubt about yourselves, because both of what you're saying around this idea of the relationship as being the thing that leads us, and the idea of checking in with your students and wanting to know how they're doing. I agree. I think for me in my work and all the work that I've created in terms of curriculum or writing has been about the connections between social emotional learning and literacy development. And that idea of social emotional learning, we kind of say it a lot in schools and at the policy level, we use those terms, but what you're exemplifying, both of you, is exactly that. It's that the child is a whole person and they're coming with so many different layers and so much heart and spirit, and also so many things that they're thinking about, wondering about, curious about. So all of what you're saying is so powerful. When I was in my first year of teaching, I asked my students, what were they wondering about, what were they thinking about? And we decided to create a poetry celebration around this idea of their wonderings and the things they were curious about. And then they had the idea to go outside and plant a, quote, poetry garden in front of the school, where they just put their poems on sticks and just arrayed them around and invited the neighbors to come pick a poem, they called it. And that all came from them. And when I think about that, even to this day, I think what a better idea that was than anything I could have thought of. And a lot of it was so coming from their own generous spirits, and their own sense of self. And I think that's what you're both capturing in really putting the relationship first and thinking about letting them, lead that in a certain way emotionally. So you guys are on it. Amazing, amazing.
Absolutely. I hear you talking about the relationships and really taking time to get to know who it is that's in front of you so that you're able to incorporate pieces of them into your instruction and into the culture and the community that you build in your classroom. And so you have me thinking, we are in the middle of a pandemic. This is COVID-19. What is an average day like? And is there a such thing as a typical day? Yeah, what does that look like? Like, what is planning? Because I'm sure that the lesson plans that I created that had a due now with the objectives and I had procedures, it just seems to me like there's more to it than that at this point. And how, like, so yeah, I'm just curious, what is an average day like? What is, planning? What is actual instruction? How does that feel? How do you experience that? What kind of experiences are you trying to create for your students? And grading, like, it's just all, so there's so much, there's so much that I'm wondering, and I'd love to hear from you about that.
Well, so our district in DC, we are live. My family makes fun of me because I say I'm going live in 5 minutes. We're live teaching for about 5.5 to 6 hours a day. So it's a long day. And by the end of the day, I can tell if how much further I can push based on the looks on their faces, because it does get to be a long day for 7-year-olds, but they do a really good job. So because of that, and because of I think something that surprised me about teaching virtually is the sheer amount of energy it takes. In the classroom, you are able to have them collaborate with each other a lot more, feed off of each other's energy. But when you're teaching virtually, a lot of the energy has to come from you. And if it's not there, then the rest of the day is really, kind of shot. So I do teaching basically throughout the day, and then planning happens at night and on the weekends, because by the end of the day, I'm exhausted and I normally don't have energy to put into a good lesson plan. So I think that has been something that I'm still struggling to try to figure out, is what boundaries can I set to make sure that I don't burn out. But yeah, so we're live for about 6 hours a day, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, and Wednesday is an asynchronous day so that we can have staff meetings and pull small groups. But it's a pretty consistent day, not too dissimilar to what we had in person.
So it's pretty much the same thing for us, live every single day. And I'm pretty much done my day by 2:05. And if I have a meeting to attend, I'll go to a meeting. If not, I'll have a prep period so I can get a few things done in that time. So pandemic planning is super tricky. So like, we work from home, so it's so easy to fall into working almost every second of the day. Like, from the time I wake up in the morning to the time I go to bed, I can work if I don't stop myself. So I'm learning, like Sage, to put limits on myself. And what I try to do, just for my own self, I was planning day by day, but that was becoming a little too much for me. So I try to get all the materials that I need for the week done by the weekend. So that way, throughout the week, I can just make tweaks, because, something always comes up and it doesn't always go according to plan. So that way I can just make tweaks to whatever material that I have. So yeah, and then just for an average block, so I see 2 sets of students. So it's about 100 minutes. I try to devote about 10 of those minutes to checking in on students, and then mini lesson, depending on how much material it is, because like Sage said, we are doing a lot of the heavy lifting in what, an assignment that we may have given students to work on together in small group just looks totally different on this type of platform, because we are only one person. And even if you do have breakout rooms, it's like, are you comfortable with sending your students into the rooms by themselves? There's so many like different things you have to consider that you never would have thought about before. Because it was just like, oh, you four can just go work in the corner and this corner and this corner. But now it's like, how does that look in rooms by themselves? And we have to practice this. So everything looks totally different. But a mini lesson could go anywhere from 25 to 35 minutes. And then after that, I try to pull a small group so we can focus on, you know, whatever strategy that I think that they need to strengthen or build. So, and I use that for the rest of the time. But that's about 100-minute block, what it looks like for me.
Pam, was there anything that you wanted to add? I mean, I know you're not.
Well, I mean, I have to say, this summer, I have a program I created called Lit Camp. So I spent a lot of time visiting the virtual Lit Camps this summer across the country on Zoom. And I was just really, really impressed by how the teachers pivoted to that virtual, because that was right when everything was still, you know, so much in flux. And I was really giving a lot of thought to exactly what you both were saying, which is two things. One is the energy, like even just the way we're projecting our voices is different. Like when you're in the classroom, you know, you can do those small groups and you can kind of just get more intimate really easily in a way that where you're, you know, everybody's calibrating their energy level a little bit as the day goes on. So that is one thing I noticed too this summer. And then the second thing, just in the spirit of what you both were saying, that I really admire what you're doing. I mean, I just can't get over it. I think it's just amazing, is just how, and when you talk about preparation, I remember, and maybe this will make you all smile a little bit, I don't know, but just not long ago, maybe 2 years ago when we were moving, I found my plan book for my first year of teaching, and I opened it and it was like, I literally realized I could have done every lesson I could have done for the whole year. Like I was so, you know, preoccupied with planning every moment, but it made me wonder, like being virtual, do you feel like you're doing less of that in a certain way, like, or more of that? You know, like it made me wonder about that when I was looking at that plan book. I thought, I wonder being virtual, if on the one hand, it seems so much harder, but on the other hand, maybe you do kind of let go a little bit of some of the rigidity of that. I don't know. What do you both think?
I feel like I have. I'm kind of a type A teacher. I like having things pretty planned out. And what I've learned is that the pandemic has taught us that we have to choose what is important and what we can let go of. And so I say that with my students as well. If something is not working, technology isn't working, you know, sometimes we just have to let things go. That is a lesson that we will have to pick back up tomorrow because it's not working right now. And us all becoming upset and crying over it or getting stressed out is not going to help us learn it any better. In fact, it will probably make it quite a bit more difficult to learn what we're trying to. So I think I've learned to let things go, and also that we have to focus on the most important skills that they need. So if we're working on building up to writing a paragraph and we still don't quite know how to write a full sentence, even if the standard says that we need to be getting to a paragraph, we need to figure out what are the steps, the key steps to get there, rather than adding in the extra bonuses that we might get to have in in-person classroom. We have to choose what is most important because our situation is just different than usual and we have to be adaptive.
So I haven't quite gotten to that to that way of thinking about it. I'm very hard on myself. I have very high expectations for myself and my students. And I don't think there's a problem with that, but I do need to learn how to, I don't know, like Sage is saying, like take it for what it is. I guess that's the best way to put it. And like learn how to make adjustments as the day goes on. But yeah, I haven't quite gotten there yet.
And I would say that's probably the hardest part of teaching right now, is the balance of keeping our expectations high and doing what we can with what we have. Because the reality is I have some students who will probably lose ground this year because home is chaotic and learning from home is hard, and technology isn't working, and family members are sick or dying. And the reality is this is a hard year and we may lose some ground. And other students this year will not cause them too much delay going into next year. But as teachers, we take their growth really personally. And so when everything doesn't get accomplished that we want them to learn, it kind of is like a stab in the heart a little bit, because that's our whole goal. And so trying to figure out what that balance is of letting things go and loving them as a whole person and giving them the space that they need and making sure that they learn everything that we want them to learn. I think Zhané hit it on the head. That's the hardest balance.
Yeah, and what I heard, my VP says this to me all the time, and I hear it brought up a lot in our meetings. It's just like we have to learn to be kind to ourselves. Like we're just so overwhelmed with, being like classroom managers and trying to teach our students all these great things, but sometimes we just, making space for them to talk about their emotions, like all of that, we're trying to fit it all into like this neat package, and it's not really working out like that. At least for me, on a day-to-day, it usually doesn't work out the way I had ever imagined it. But I'm just trying to learn to take it easier on myself. I mean, it's super hard, but
Right. So yeah, hearing you all talk about the challenges and the struggles, and Janae, you transitioning and mentioning your vice principal and their words I'm going to take a shift or pivot, and I'm going to go to the Q&A because there's a question here that speaks to support and specifically asks, has your building administration shown any level of understanding or compassion around the struggles and the challenges with your teaching? Are they allowing you to negotiate? Are they being a little bit more lenient? Or have they provided any specific support for you to help work through some of these unique challenges that are COVID specific and virtual specific?
So this is my first year in the classroom. So in terms of comparing administrative support to last year, I can't really do that because I don't have much of a comparison. But I can say that I do feel like I get support from my administration, whether it's just needing more time to complete a task or them coming in and supplying me with feedback. I definitely think that I get that. And even in terms of being a new teacher, there's like additional PDs that we can attend after school. Like there's just a whole bunch of things in place to try to help us out. Sometimes it is hard, just being transparent, taking advice and things like that from them. I'm not going to say like taking advice from them can be challenging, but it's just they haven't done this. They haven't really walked in our shoes. It just in this particular instance, like yes, they were all great teachers. I 100% know that. But in terms of them, being a teacher on this platform, going through WebEx sessions and trying to manage, the chat and all this other stuff, they haven't done it yet because none of us have. So it's challenging, but I definitely think that they're there to support and not judge or anything like that. And just trying to offer solutions to, whatever problems that I have. So I definitely think they're a great support.
I've also felt grateful that I have supportive administration. I think it's hard for administration as well. I think I have I only have 15 in my class this year, which is like a beautiful number, so small, the smallest class I've ever had. And even still, it can be hard to see when a student isn't there because you don't have an empty chair. It's just one less box on your screen. And so it could be hard to see that. And I would imagine that for administration, it is similar, trying to manage so many staff members and making sure everyone has what they need. So that being said, I think I felt grateful that my administration's highest priority with staff is to give grace. And I've been very grateful for that. But I do think, like Zhané is saying, it's hard because no one has done this before. And so even the suggestions that are given might not necessarily work. And it's just about kind of being willing to try a bunch of things and see what sticks. And I would say that's probably the hardest part.
That's such a good point. I mean, what you're saying about that you guys are trailblazing something that's never happened in the history of public education. You're in the most, probably one of the most transformational, pivotal moments in the history of this world, of this earth on a certain level. In some ways, I think that we've all been talking a lot about this, in the many conversations I have about how can we support new teachers, what will be the best way to do that going forward. And for me, I feel like it is about hearing your stories and to make sure that your stories are heard. That's why so happy and grateful to Lauren and Sharon for putting this together, because I think that what you're both saying is so, it's like you're really reporting, you're reporters in a certain way, saying, look, here we are in this new world and our administrators are giving us a lot of support, but we're walking a new journey. And I think both of you have said tonight, the idea of being kind to yourselves and showing and giving grace to yourself, like saying, this day felt maybe hard. I got to sit down and just take a break and put my feet up. And then the other thing too is, and I think this for me, and maybe this is true for all new teachers in any context, is that when in doubt, remember your students can guide you. They do know, when you yourself are feeling that sense of vulnerability, to turn back to them and say, how are we doing? Or how's it going today? Or do we need a break? Because they are so wise. And I think that, again, just thinking about these times, if we think about it as we're not going to go back, we're changing, we're going to always to be different now in terms of thinking about teaching and learning. And whatever even if it's rushing over you right now, what are the things every day that at the end of the day you say, wow, that was something really profound that I was thinking about today. Later, I think that's going to be incredibly valuable to your teaching life. I know probably can't believe it right now, but it definitely, I think all of this is, you're standing on the brink of an understanding of how we use technology, of how we relate to our family communities, of how we think about voice and how we create a community of multiple voices in complex circumstances. So, keep it up, what you're thinking and what you're doing, because we are in a most profound time right now.
And so just to carry on with the notion, and thank you for that word, trailblazers, because you are blazing trails. It's unknown, it's uncharted territory. But to continue along that that theme or that idea, and also the notion that you are learners, what is it that you have learned about yourselves as teachers, about your craft, and just schooling in general, working through this pandemic and working through this COVID-19 experience?
I would say something that I learned, so when we were closed down last year, we switched to kind of a unknown sort of teaching. There weren't a lot of guidelines on how we were supposed to be teaching in my district. Asynchronous, synchronous, every day, every other day, there just weren't guidelines. And so because most of my students could not meet at the same time because of family dynamics or because of scheduling at home, we did mostly asynchronous learning in my class. And what I'm learning coming back into doing synchronous live teaching every day is that students are really the heart of the classroom. And so even if you're giving the same material, the same content, the same skills asynchronously, unless there are students there who give voice to the content, who give feedback to what they are learning, the lesson is dead. And I think, Sharon, what you were saying about voice, and what we'll take forward, I think remembering that student voice is the most important thing in the classroom, along with relationships, because that's how they learn. If they are able to make a connection with their own lives, and speak truth to what they are learning, the learning will actually stick and carry them forward. And so I'm hoping that that's something that isn't forgotten, with whatever shifts continue throughout the end of this pandemic, that student voice really has to be, and student interests have to be at the heart of whatever we do next.
I think for me, I think COVID-19 has really made me constantly reevaluate the goals that I set for myself. So I think before, and I don't think, again, and I said something like this before, I don't think that having huge goals for yourself is a problem. It's just like, I think I've had to change the steps that I take towards reaching those goals and what those look like. Because I mean, if we look around, nothing is the way anyone had planned. So I'm just constantly trying to remind myself, like, put your best foot forward. And if it doesn't take, or it doesn't look like what you or anyone else thought, that doesn't mean that you haven't, done your actual best. So that's a big thing for me.
Well, I think, for me, as just learning is always happening. And I'm learning right now, thinking about what it means to be a learner. I think in terms of this period of time, these last several months, yes, I think more than ever, to what you're both saying, that everything I thought was true is even more true. The power of the student voices, the power of self-care, that idea of constantly grappling with ideas and sifting through them. And I also feel like, just in thinking about something that might be of interest to everybody, or somehow in a small way inspiring as it is for me, is that just about a week ago, I happened to see that I was tagged on Facebook by a student from my first year of teaching. That was a long time ago. If you look at my LinkedIn, you'll see that was quite some time ago. So he's completely, he has kids, he's got to work, and he posted, it was a Shel Silverstein poem. It was a simple poem. And one of the other students from the class joined into the conversation and said, something like, "Thank you, Mrs. Allyn, for this poem." And I thought, if you think about life and time, for our students, they will remember your names forever. And that work is imprinted on them like a heartbeat, and so the work you're doing now, this idea of learning as we're learning with our students in COVID, or thinking about, like, I changed Lit Camp completely as I was going through COVID with my students, because I rewrote the curriculum as we were going through the experience, because I was rewriting it. I was co-authoring it with my students. I was really doing that. And I think that was the best curriculum I've ever done, because I was co-authoring it. And I think maybe if there's anything for us to think about in this, is that everything you believed was true about teaching is even more true on some level, that it's life-changing, that it's it is about voice, and it's also about silence and quiet too. It's about your own self-reflection. And so I think everything you're saying is, I wonder if in a normal, if there's ever such a thing as a first year of teaching, I wonder how many of these feelings would have been this intense. Of course not, but maybe that does give all of us the opportunity to be new teachers again. I know a couple of people here have said that I feel new too. And I think we all feel in some way new. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I definitely feel that idea of co-authoring that curriculum, it was so inspiring to me. And to think that my students are still giving me voice, that's very powerful.
So yeah, voice is the word and the theme or the trend that I hear all of you talking about. And just how do you bring student voice into the classroom and put your students at the center of the learning, which makes me want to know, how do your own backgrounds come into the classroom and influence what you do as a teacher and an educator? And what do you do to ensure that your students' cultures and their individual experiences and perspectives live and are the center of the teaching and learning experience in your classrooms?
So I can start. I think that when I was growing up, there was no real space for feelings in the classroom. So that's why, like I said previously, I make time to check up on my students daily. So that's really one big thing for me in terms of like, I don't know, because while you're in school, you really learn who you are. So I think it's so important that we give them space to explore who they are, and then who they are in, like as individuals, and then who they are like amongst a group. I'm sorry, I can't get my thoughts together. Amongst a group. So I definitely think that that's why I push that so much, you know, that SEL being incorporated into our lessons. And then just in terms of their culture, so it's great because at my school, a lot of my students are Hispanic, and that's something that I don't really know much about. So I think they get really excited when I ask them to share with me, you know, some of the things that they do, you know, culturally that's different from what I do, and just giving them that space to talk about themselves, and then tying it into what it is that we're doing. So, for example, we've been focusing on like how to write a letter, the structure of a letter, 5 parts, and all of that, and just taking what they're telling me about their culture and allowing that to be what the basis for what they write about next is super important. So yeah.
So I mean, I'm a white woman from Minnesota who teaches predominantly Black and brown children in DC, and I know that I don't look like most of my students. And so I've been really intentional about making sure that we have an abundance of both windows and mirrors in our classroom, windows being things that allow them to look into other cultures and other communities that don't look like them, and mirrors being stories that reflect who they are. And I think by both being intentional and centering student voice, and student voice, I think, often comes from asking questions and allowing students to be the ones to answer. And that's when most of the learning comes out anyways, is having students rephrase things or draw their own connections. And by doing that, students just naturally bring in what they know, and that brings in their culture. And so I think by centering students, that is, that's the best way to bring in their culture, is to let them do the speaking and be the one to kind of draw the connections and pull the pieces together at the end, but to allow the students to do most of the work. It kind of does that naturally.
I love listening to both of you, really. And I guess thinking about my past or my own life as a child, stories were very important to me. I was very, very shy as a child, and I loved reading so much. I felt that it really both protected me and also liberated me. I could see myself, in the world in a very brave and powerful way by reading stories of different girls doing things that I couldn't have imagined until I started reading those books. And then conversely, also just finding myself in the pages of books, my own voice, my own heart, ideas or things I was experiencing that I didn't know other people were experiencing. And so for me, reading became my career because and children's own stories because of that exact experience that I had, that it made me feel like I always had company in the world, and that reading and writing are not just tools that we use to get, the way we talk about it a little bit clinically, like we say, oh, you're going to get a job, you're going to go to college. Actually, reading and writing for me are life-saving. They're liberation. And when I founded Lit World in 2007, a lot of why I founded Lit World was because I felt that children being able to read and write is the ultimate tool for freedom. And once you can do those things, nobody can stop you. You can find out and understand about the world, about yourself. You know your rights. You can learn about your health and your body, and also take care of your body and your health and your mind and your spirit. And you are like a fortress, So I think for me that my own life as a child connects completely to my life as an adult. And it's what I wish for every child. And I think that what I wish is I wish for them teachers like you two. So I'm extremely excited that you're in this profession.
So my next question is about, so we've talked about relationships with students. Let's talk a little bit about the relationships with parents and the community, and families in general. And so how do you build relationships with parents and families and the larger community? And why do you think, and I'm going to assume, why do you think they matter? And yeah, just so how do you do that?
I think building relationships with families has looked a lot different during the pandemic, in part because I'm sitting in their living rooms all the time. And so they really can't escape me. I just see them more often. They're walking around, they're taking care of other siblings in the house, or they're working themselves. And so in a lot of ways, it's helped me become a lot closer with a lot of my families because I'm constantly talking with them. They're able to also see what their child is working on in a more intimate way than they can if the child is in a school building. They just have different eyes on what they're seeing. But I think I always tell my families in the beginning of the year, we're on the same team. And by saying that and really showing that through my actions that really we are on the same team, the rest of the year goes much more smoothly because we're both on the team of their child and we can do whatever we need to in tandem in order to make sure that their child succeeds.
I just love that we're on the same team. That is so good. I'm sorry. But for me, I definitely think parent contact is everything. So at the start of the school year, I had this thought, a lot like what Sage is saying, I'm in their living room. I didn't think that my job would require me reaching out any more than that because they hear me every day. Most of them see me every day, or at least I see them every day. So I didn't think that I would need to do any additional reaching out. But I've noticed as the weeks go on, it's like the opposite. So I need to constantly reach out, even if it's just a quick message like, hi, I haven't seen so-and-so in the last 2 days. And I think they really appreciate that because then they know our class doesn't really go on the same way without your students showing up. So I think reaching out to them is super important, even when it's just me reminding them, oh, so-and-so didn't do this assignment and this and that. I think they realize just how important it is, and that it's not just them coming and sitting in front of a computer screen. It's literally, this is how they're learning now. This is more than just, I don't know, like a TV with keys. So I definitely think parent contact is important. And also, I'm just trying to get my students and their families to like take stake in this, because I think at first I was doing so much of the heavy lifting. And I still am, but I'm just trying to get them to understand like how serious this is. And I know it's not the ideal circumstances, but they have to get invested. So that's why I really like what Sage is saying about like it being a partnership. We all need to be invested in this so that way the student can make progress. So I'm constantly affirming them, like, you're capable, you're responsible, you're smart, things like that, just so they know that they're important, you know, and yes.
And I think quickly to hop onto that as well, I think I saw someone in the chat say to also talk about, you know, positive things that they're doing, which I think is also, you know, today the student who went up from being at kindergarten level and reading up to second grade level. I got to tell his mom that on the screen while he was reading to me, and just like the joy that was on his face, the joy that was on her face. It can be hard to find joyful things in this time. And so to see that the investment that a parent is putting into their child, to the time, you know, making sure that he's up at 8:30 and online every day, that it's really paying off, I think is exciting, and parents need to be commended for that as well, because virtual learning is hard, I think, for everyone involved, and parents, it's definitely difficult for them as well.
So we've had this really dynamic and amazing conversation, and the three of you are phenomenal educators and just, I want to say community servants, because you are sewing into the community and building people up, and whether they're children and or the teachers who are working with the children. But you have me with this last lingering thought. And if I could neatly put a bow on it and just like sew everything up, and it's like gold wrapping paper and a pretty big red bow, my thought would be for all of you, what is it after this conversation, because you've done a lot of reflection in answering these questions. So what is it from this conversation that you're going to take away with you and may take back into the classroom, the school, the teachers that you work with, when life becomes normal again, whatever that means? That was pithy.
Well, I think for me, just remembering that students, like Pam was saying, are whole beings, and they live dynamic lives just like the rest of us. And so even when we're not in a pandemic, they still have other things going on in their lives, and to be really fully aware and respectful of that, because I think it can be easy to think, I spend 8 hours with them a day, that their sole responsibility is to school. And while school is, I think, can be a very joyful and meaningful place for students, it's also one part of a lot of other parts of their lives. And so in the pandemic, it's been very evident because you can see everything going on in their home. But when we go back to school, I am going to try to remember just to give a little bit more grace and a little bit more respect to the fact that they are full beings living complicated and hopefully more joyful lives.
So I think I completely agree with what Sage was saying. You know, and a friend of mine always says this too, like, we're living through a pandemic, they're living through a pandemic. So we don't give, or at least sometimes I feel like I don't give them enough credit for that. So definitely going to keep that in mind. And also I really like what Pam said, reading and writing can save a life. So I'm going to be thinking about that, because I don't know, sometimes after a hard day, it's like, why am I even doing this? I'm going to be completely honest with you. Some days I'm like, why am I doing this? But just staying rooted in that and that truth, and the fact that I'm here for my students and they're showing up every day in spite of us living through a pandemic, trying to learn how to become better readers and writers. They just, I don't know, they deserve so much credit for that. So I'm thankful for this conversation, because it's just like a reminder on why I'm here, you know? So that's all.
Oh, I mean, what I think I appreciate what you both have said so much, and also just the thoughtfulness and the mindful ways that you're working your craft, because that's really what teaching is. I feel like all these years, for me, I'm a very creative person. I think of myself as being a creative person. And so when I think about teaching, I think of it as the ultimate creative act, because you're constantly shaping something. It's not shaping a child, it's actually shaping an experience, shaping yourself, you know. So for me, about what's memorable about this is I see you both creating, shaping, making your lives in this world and having so much integrity in the middle of so much chaos, that for me, when I think about your students tomorrow, waking up and coming to join you on that screen, and I think how blessed they are to have you in all of your realness, your real human people doing the work. And that's so much better than them seeing something that's, you know, not real, that's maybe a little bit less authentic, and perhaps all those moments that you think are the moments you're stumbling are actually the moments of the ultimate teaching. And I see both, you know, thinking about both of you, I think about the work I'm doing in building curriculum or writing books or thinking about the act or the art of teaching. I think about, I will not forget this conversation, because I think I really appreciate that you gave of yourselves tonight, as I know that you do each day in your work. And I only hope that everyone around you continues to support you and to give to you all that you're giving to your children. So I'm grateful just to be here tonight and to be in this moment with you.
So I just want to thank you all for your time. I want to thank you for this conversation. The idea about putting students at the center, building relationships because our students matter, giving grace and understanding that we are all experiencing one heck of a challenge that no one could have ever foreseen, that has created, I think it was Pam that said, use the word chaos. You know, we're all trying to figure out how to negotiate through this. And you all have come here this evening and shared some great gems and jewels that we can all take forward as we move in our work with children and students. And so I'm just going to close by asking if there are any last thoughts that you would like to share. And I'm going to ask if Zhané, I would like for you to have the last word, because I forgot to introduce you because I didn't see you. I had my screen set up wrong. But with that being the case, if there's anything that you all want to share, and Zhané, you get the last word.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for having me. And Pam and Janae, thank you for taking the time out to have this discussion. I think it can be really hard to remember that we are all going through this, especially when we're by ourselves teaching in our bedrooms or our living rooms, or writing curriculum in your home without being able to see who you're actually writing it for. And so I think this is just such a nice reminder that there are other folks who are working really hard to make this all work as well as it is. So thank you.
I'll say that I think just in the spirit of the teaching tradition, just for Sage and Janae to know that I'm here for you. If you need me in any time, way, shape, or form, you can call on me. So just know that we're teachers standing on the shoulders of teachers and the traditions, and then the breaking of traditions and making it new and a new story. I appreciate you, and I think that you inspire me. So anything I can ever do for you, just let me know.
Yes, I just want to come on here and say thank you first to everybody who's here in attendance for like listening to us and hearing our thoughts and what it is that we're going through. And thank you to admin. I know like we're all in this weird situation, and I think that we're managing the best that we can. So I truly appreciate it. And thank you to Sage and Pam. I couldn't have had a conversation like this with anyone else. So I really appreciate it. And it's just good to know that I'm not alone. It's like, you're not alone, but until you have spaces like this where you can sit and talk, it just serves as confirmation. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wells. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you all again. And just remember, we're all still becoming. Good night.